Suspicious behavior. Is it something you would report? That's what we're going to talk about next. Hello, my name is Victor Vogel. In this particular video, what I want to talk about is suspicious behavior, but to understand a little bit about suspicious behavior and the confidence that you need to report suspicious behavior, I want to cover a little bit about how terrorists and criminals tend to think and operate. Having this knowledge will give you a little more confidence in what to look for and when to report it. Okay, briefly, what I really want to do is spend a few moments just talking to you about how criminals and terrorists operate. And basically, they all do this same thing. And it's important for you to understand this because I want you to know the timing at which points you will most likely come in contact and observe suspicious behavior of terrorists and criminals. First of all, let's just go down the list here of how criminals, and you can add the word terrorists, operate in their environment. They first begin by selecting a victim. They target someone or someplace or something, and they have to identify that is going to deliver them what they're looking for in terms of the results, given what they're going to have to sacrifice to get there, whether that's money or even their life. So the target becomes very important. And it's important for you to understand when you appear alert and people around you appear alert, then people who are criminals and terrorists will tend to avoid people who are alert because they thrive on the concept of surprise. And if you're alert, they're afraid of being discovered, and there's a probability that the act that they want to commit will not be successful, and even the probability that they may be caught or stopped prior to the act and more information garnered about their organization. So targeting a victim, a lot of it has to do with how alert people are around them. But as you might gather, for example, and we'll look at this, an example from the Department of Homeland Security video that I'm going to show you here in a little bit. There are some areas where people are less alert or generally tend to be less alert, like a hotel environment or a restaurant environment or a sporting event environment. These are places that people are not concentrating normally on what's going on around them, but more so on the event that they're involved with. So this is how criminals and terrorists tend to go about the business of targeting people. They first look for targets that are going to give them the destruction or the result that they want, and they have to make sure that these people whom they're targeting are vulnerable. Next, they'll go about gathering information, and they'll spend a lot of time thinking through how they're going to go through this process. Then they'll start collecting intelligence on, say if it's a hotel, they'll be looking for when the busiest times are, what's the best entrances or exits in the hotel, what is security doing, when do they tend to be around, is there security cameras around, if it's a sporting event, do they just take tickets and let you in the door, or do they first double check your ticket electronically with a device, and then you go through a pat-down process and a bag search and that kind of approach. So they'll start gathering information about best times, best places, security, entrance and exits, that kind of information. Then they'll start observing to make sure that the information they've collected is in fact correct. And they'll say you can find people sitting in lobbies taking notes. Sometimes they'll be using video cameras or iPhone cameras to take pictures of video, CCTV cameras in the area, or the type of personnel, what security personnel there are, what they look like, what their schedules are, what their routine is, etc. So they'll also start observing when people leave exits that are restricted, so they might be able to slip in the door behind them, things like that. Then they'll go in, once they have this information, and all during this process too, but mostly when they have this information all collected, they will then get together in an off-site area and begin to plan their attack. And it could be one person doing the planning, it could be multiple people doing the planning. But they will start planning. They'll start looking at all the information they have gathered. And sometimes this will take a few minutes, sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes weeks. And sometimes it takes years in the case of something like the Twin Tower bombings. So a lot of planning goes into this process, and once the plan is established, they then have to start allocating resources, and that means they have to go find the weapons that they want. They have to find a place to build bombs, bomb material. They have to find transportation. There's a variety of things that they look for that are resources they're going to need to commit the final act. Okay? So then they go about the business of committing the act. They actually get in there and start doing the execution, whether it's a bombing, whether it's a shooting, whether it's a robbery, a carjacking, whatever it might be. They begin to execute it. And then, of course, the last thing in the scenario is their ability to escape. How do I get out of there? They have planned for this, and then they've looked at things like Google Maps to see what routes are busiest during the time of day, so that they might be able to change clothes on the run and meld into the crowd, a busy crowd around the area. What are the one-way streets? What streets tend to be blocked? Is there any construction in the area? These are things they look for in the escape route. They actually might go over those escape routes, say using Google Earth, and then they may actually go travel those as part of the planning, observing process to determine how they're going to escape. And then, of course, alternatives if they're not going to be escape, which might be suicide bombers, may not have an escape route. So these are things that I want you to be aware of. Now, so where are the places that you're most likely to have the opportunity to see suspicious behavior in this process and notice it and maybe take action to say something about it that would prevent them from executing the plan? And where those places are the first three categories: when they're selecting the target or the victim, when they're gathering information on that target or victim, and when they're observing the target or victim. These are chances where you're going to have an opportunity to see somebody doing something unusual or out of place or doesn't belong or doesn't quite look right. They're doing some things, and we'll show you some examples of this here in just a few minutes. You might also see this or observe this in the resource allocation. For example, in the San Bernardino bombing, the actual terrorist neighbors observed them buying things and talking about weapons and hoarding all kinds of things into their garage, and it was suspicious to them, but they didn't want to, because they were Muslim, they didn't want to create a problem talking about it or reporting it. And this is the dilemma we have to overcome in today's time. So part of what we're going to show you is some examples of this kind of activity, and then what to kind of look for when we say suspicious behavior, and then we'll show what you really need to do, and we'll talk about these as we go along the way. Before we go further down the path, I just want to make the link between suspicious behavior and threats. Threats are things that actually can do harm to you, and where they normally begin to surface is when people begin to suspect something can harm them. So it's drawing that link between suspicious behavior and threat, at which point somebody begins to wonder whether they should report something there. So it's kind of important to understand where threats reside, where people tend to see threats reside. And the first place that people tend to see threats reside is in people. In other words, that's normally what we think of when we think of threats. Somebody is pulling a gun and going to shoot us. And the question becomes, is the threat the gun or is it the person? It usually ends up being the person. But there are times when threats can be seen as objects, like the backpack and the Boston bombing. Or if somebody leaves a suitcase unattended in the airport, or there happens to be a bottle of unusual liquid that doesn't have a label on it, like a water bottle or something. So items or objects can also be considered threats. These are things. Cars, for example, are considered threats, and they are an object. So a person might park a car in an unusual place in a heavy populated area and leave it. In fact, the Murrah bombing in Oklahoma was from a truck that was left in the parking area out in front of the federal building that most people normally don't park. So you can see that objects by themselves can be threats from that standpoint. So that's important to understand. But we can also have threats in situations or events. For example, a situation might be a protest march. Protest march could be considered a threat, and it becomes suspicious, for example, when a bunch of people show up in black outfits and their mask, and they have pepper spray and protective gear and all that kind of stuff. You begin to think that perhaps that protest might become violent, or someone happens to be carrying guns slung over their shoulders. There's a pretty good indication that that suspicious behavior could turn into a viable threat, and you would consider it a threat until you prove that it is not a threat at that point. So what you're going to see as we look through some of these Department of Homeland Security films, the setting is in a hotel and a mall area, and what you'll begin to see is that sometimes there is a combination of these particular threat categories. For example, some person may be acting in a suspicious manner but leave an object unattended. So both of those are really perceived as suspicious behavior, and both the person and the object really are considered threats at that point in time until you validate that they are not. And sometimes that happens, and so the lines sort of kind of get blurred because we don't want to offend anybody, but you're going to see here that you want to focus on behavior that's out of the norm or unusual. So we'll take a look at some of this stuff and then talk about it in small segments a little bit so that you can get a feel for how suspicious behavior can constitute a potential threat and why that's important for you to report to people.
Every day, millions of Americans come to places like this. Happy, safe, and secure. They are buying and selling, keeping our economy's wheels moving. And you can help keep it that way. We all share the responsibility to fight terror and criminal misconduct. But as someone who works in a store, mall, shopping center, or market, you have an obligation to help. Because sometimes ordinary people can stop extraordinary events. What can you do? You can recognize and report suspicious behavior in your workplace. This is not hard. You know what's normal, usual, and expected, and what's not. Terrorists and criminals may look no different than the shoppers around you at all times. But don't think that you can spot suspicious people. Things aren't always as they seem. There aren't really suspicious people, only suspicious behavior.
Mall information, may I help you? Yes, the mall is open until 9:30 tonight. Well, our parking lots are patrolled 24 hours a day, and Sir, I don't know how many guards are on duty. I wouldn't be able to give you that information even if Yes, sir. I believe you need to talk to mall security about that. May I transfer you? Sir, may I transfer you? Hello?
Potential attackers may ask you about facility security, layout, or structure. They might want to know how they can enter undetected and what areas are least heavily guarded or most vulnerable. If you hear questions of this nature, don't ignore them. Report the incident to your manager or security personnel. Asking unusual questions is suspicious behavior. Terrorists study their targets carefully and record details of entrances, exits, security equipment, and traffic patterns. Photos and video aid in their planning.
And I have a scarf that would kind of work with this.
What is it?
It's just kind of nothing. There's just some guy out there.
Camera?
Well, anyway, so you wear this together.
Okay.
And you put that jacket over
The
it.
jacket.
Yeah, and then you wear it out just like Friday night, Saturday night, whatever.
Perfect.
It's not unusual to see someone taking photos or video in a store. But when that person is trying to conceal this activity, or focusing on details like security cameras, loading docks, or restricted areas, this is suspicious behavior. Retailers depend on the free flow of customers. No gates or security checks stand in the way. But what makes retail establishments inviting for customers also makes them attractive for those wishing harm.
All right, well, I have to go, but I'll see you guys later.
All right, bye. Dude, I said no whipped cream.
Just deal with it, man. That's what she gave me. Check that out.
What?
The guy just drops a bag on a table, then walks away.
And?
And it's a little bit weird, huh?
You're a little weird.
Come on, man, seriously. Should we tell someone about that?
Tell what?
I don't know.
Waste no time in reporting suspicious packages to security or police. They may contain explosives or weapons. Be aware of items that are not where they belong. Never move or touch them. Let trained security personnel decide what should be done. Shoppers carry packages and bags of all kinds in stores and malls. But concealing or leaving them behind is suspicious.
Terrorists and criminals work to blend in and may look no different than the guests and visitors that come through your hotel every day.
The silver Range Rover?
That's the one.
Right on it, right on it.
But you can spot suspicious behavior. You know what is normal and customary and what's unusual and out of place.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Did you tell him he could leave his car back here? Sir! Sir! You can't leave your car here, sir!
Guests often leave vehicles at hotel and motel entrances while they check in or load bags. In and of itself, this may not be suspicious activity. But the abandonment of vehicles, particularly trucks, vans, or cars missing identification such as company logos or license plates, near entrances and loading docks is suspicious behavior.
So you have a credit card.
Here's your key, and the elevator is right behind you.
Can you put a credit card? I'll do it.
No credit card.
Terrorists and criminals do their best to cover their tracks.
Oh, sir, if you will just give me one moment.
This may include paying in cash or using false identification.
Hang on a second. Let me call you back.
I'm sorry to
What's up,
bother you.
Suzanne?
I have this guest who wants to stay for a few weeks and wants to pay in advance in cash.
No. Cash is money last time I checked. What's the problem? Did you ask him for a credit card?
Yeah, I did. He said he doesn't have one. He doesn't use them.
No credit cards? How about an ID?
He gave me one. It just doesn't feel right.
Well, everyone's normal until they check into a hotel. Problem?
I guess it's not a problem. It's just weird. Okay, we have everything checked out then. That's for you. And I'll...
If your interaction with a patron feels odd, if that person appears nervous or anxious, refuses to show ID, if the ID seems to be altered, or if the guest insists on paying with cash for sums that are customarily charged and refuses to show a credit card, alert your manager or security personnel. This is suspicious behavior.
When I heard she was going to be on the show this season, I was completely floored. Who knew she could dance?
She's wonderful.
She is. And that partner of hers, what's his name?
Rudolfo.
He is an artist. Anyway,
In a lodging environment, it's not unusual for bags to stand unattended for short periods of time.
Grace, did you see that?
what?
A woman. She left that bag at the table.
No, but people leave things there all the time.
I know, but it looked like she did it on purpose. And she was acting a little strange, and it doesn't look like she's coming back for it.
Oh, she will. She's probably just getting a coffee. You'll be fine.
Suitcases, backpacks, and boxes may contain explosives or other harmful substances. Pay attention to your instincts. Leaving bags or boxes unattended in a deliberate or calculated manner, or for long periods of time, is suspicious behavior.
Hey, Arturo, Inigo Special, Table 3 is getting cranky. Hey, Dimitri.
Hey, how you doing?
Same old. How's Cassie today?
Got me working hard. You working banquet tonight?
Always.
Terrorists and criminals may try to access secure or employee-only areas, or steal uniforms or staff IDs as they plan or carry out attacks.
Hey, you know who that guy is?
No, is he new?
Hey, buddy, did you punch in yet?
Some people.
Really? He's not gonna make any friends around here, huh?
Definitely not. All right, I'll see you later.
All right, see you later.
Be aware of people who attempt to gain access to restricted areas, take pictures or video of, or ask unusual questions about security, shifts, or things a guest wouldn't need to know.
The small details, the out-of-place behavior you see, may stop an attack, protect your workplace and job, and save lives. Pick up the phone. Report it. It may be nothing, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Pay attention to people you don't know entering employee-only areas of your store, mall, or center. You can ask them where they're going and why. Even if they leave, tell your manager or security right away. Trying to enter restricted areas is suspicious behavior. Crowds of people and easy access offer terrorists and criminals what they want. Places where attacks will inflict maximum damage and loss of life. Sow fear, disrupt our economy, and change our way of life. A person wearing a heavy coat, vest or jacket may be attempting to conceal weapons or explosives. Don't confront them. Wearing bulky clothing, especially when it's inappropriate for the season and acting strangely, is suspicious behavior. Ordinary people can stop extraordinary events.
Oh, excuse me, security.
Hi, this is Phyllis at the information desk. This may be nothing, but
There's this guy standing out there today, and he was taking down notes and looking at the cameras and stuff.
I think I just saw someone sneak in through the North Corridor exit.
Yeah, hi, is this the police?
When you witness things like this, people leaving packages or bags behind, strangers taking photographs or video, drivers leaving vehicles in odd places, the temptation will be strong. You will want to ignore your instincts, turn away, assume someone else will act if necessary. But the threat is real. Report suspicious behavior.
Listen to your instincts. Notify your manager, hotel security personnel, or the police.
A woman left a bag just outside the door, and it doesn't look like she's going to come back for it.
Hey, boss, it's Dimitri. Yeah, listen, some shady guy just came into the back entrance.
We need to bring up somebody quickly. The room has all kind of stuff. It's very scary.
Hey, I've got an unattended vehicle out here. Yeah, the driver just walked off, and I don't think this guy's coming back. Can we get somebody out here to look at this?
You know what? You're right. Let's call this thing in.
You shouldn't investigate. You shouldn't intervene. But you can make a difference in keeping our hotels safe by reporting suspicious behavior.
I hope you found these videos helpful. In this presentation, one of the things that you learned was the method of operation for criminals and terrorists, how they go about selecting their targets, gathering information, planning, etc. That should give you a base to understand when you're able to most likely see a potential threat or suspicious behavior. And you learn the difference between suspicion and threat, and how suspicious behavior can be a threat and should be considered a threat until such time as you validate it not to be a threat. And finally, you learned it's important to respond and how to respond. You need to understand that when you report something, report it to the officials, the proper officials, either security, law enforcement, the FBI, whoever you need to contact that you feel you need to contact. And you shouldn't be worried about whether that's going to be offensive to the other person or not, because those agencies are geared and understand that they're soliciting your help, and they're not going to put you in the center of anything at that point in time. It's important that you be able to see this and understand this in your reporting process. Turn it over to the proper authorities. Let them handle the situation. Don't ever approach a bag. Don't ever approach a person. Simply pick up the phone and make a call. Now you understand more about when they say, if you see something, say something. That's something that you're supposed to see. You're a little more educated about what to find. I thank you for watching this video. I hope it proves helpful, and I hope it encourages you to say something if you see something. This is Victor Vogel. I'll be out there creating bad guy free zones.